Alright folks, the purpose of this brief mini lecture is to explain how to approach an in-class essay exam and to offer some hints for success. Quite often at the end of English composition classes, you're asked to write an in-class written final essay. In English 1020, this might be the final exam at the end of that course, and in week 8 of English 1021, this is the time for the general writing requirement, which is the essay exam that must be passed in order to graduate and receive a 4-year degree at Johnson & Wales. Quite often, the prompts look very much like this one. They're typically argumentative prompts that will present an argumentative issue to you. And you can really divide these prompts into 3 parts. Typically the first part is one position, and then in the second part of the prompt you'll have the opposing view on that particular issue, and then in the last part, the last third, you're essentially given the directions on what you're supposed to do as the writer. And typically this involves you taking a position on this topic and being asked to argue it yourself. So if you look at this particular prompt here, what you see is Johnson & Wales University is proud of its student dress code. They argue that their policy of professional dress prepares students for expectations of future employers and is conducive to a positive learning environment. So that's your first position. Detractors, on the other hand, and this signals the next position, claim that such a policy deprives students of a, quote, true college experience and does not allow for individual self-expression. So in the last third of the prompt, we get what we're asked to do as the writer. Discuss why you believe this policy is a benefit or a hindrance for students. Support your position with specific examples and illustrations, and attempt to persuade your audience to accept this view as well. So quite often when students are given a task like this one, or prompts like these in an in-class essay, there are some things that they commonly do wrong. Probably one of the biggest is they just don't carefully read the prompt. And because of this, they don't always also clearly answer the question. So the worst thing you could do is walk into class on the day of the exam, look over the instruction sheet, quickly read through some of the prompts without really thinking through them, and just randomly choose one at will and begin writing. That's the worst thing that you could possibly do, because what you might discover is that you really don't have a lot to say about that particular prompt, and you may not even discover that until half of your exam time has already expired, and then you really don't have time to start all over again. You also just may never really directly answer the question, and if you don't answer the question directly, well, that's an automatic fail. So you want to be really, really careful about that. And another thing that causes problems is because they didn't read the prompt carefully, students also don't have a clear thesis statement, and they don't think through the examples that they're using in their paper to support that particular statement. And then of course organization is another big problem as well. But all of these errors can be avoided if we just follow some tips for success on how to prepare to write the exam. The first thing that you should do is read the prompt extremely carefully. It might be a good idea to underline exactly what the prompt is asking you to do. You should also pay close attention to the particular diction of the prompt. You want to look for verbs and conjunctions particularly. As you know, verbs are action verbs, and so action words. So if you see a verb, most likely what it's going to do in that last third of that prompt is give you the action that you're supposed to take as the writer. Conjunctions are very important as well, particularly and or. Pay close attention to those because an and may ask you to perform, if you see that word, you may be asked to perform 2 things. If you see or, you may be asked to choose between one or another thing and then argue that particular position, which is what we were asked to do in the first prompt, the sample prompt that I gave you, which is discuss why you believe this policy is a benefit or a hindrance. So in other words, what you're supposed to do is choose which side of that you want to take and argue it. So after you've read this prompt very, very carefully and you've identified the action words, and you've identified the conjunctions, the next step is to identify the question that is posed by the prompt. Sometimes this question is directly asked, sometimes it's simply implied. And if you go back to the sample prompt, you'll notice the question is merely implied. It's not directly asked. It's implied in that statement, discuss why you believe this policy is a benefit or a hindrance. So you're essentially being asked here, which do you believe that it is? Is it a benefit or is it a hindrance? So once you've identified the question, what you want to do is answer that question in one sentence. So if the question is this policy a benefit or a hindrance, then your answer is going to be one of these two things. I think the Johnson & Wales University student dress code is a benefit, or I think the Johnson & Wales student dress code is a hindrance. So once you've developed your claim, which is also your thesis, let me talk about that a little bit. In expository writing, which is most of the type of writing you do in English 1020, we refer to that main point that you're attempting to make in your writing as a thesis statement. However, in argumentative writing, which is what you typically do in English 1021 for the most part, we refer to that central point that you're trying to prove or argue as your claim. They essentially mean the same thing. They mean the central point of your essay, but the goal that they're attempting to accomplish may be very different. A thesis is a statement that you would use when you're attempting to inform an audience about a topic, but a claim is the term that you would use if you were arguing a point. But essentially they basically mean the same thing. So once you have a thesis statement and you know which side you're going to take, well, then it's time for you to do some invention work. And the point of the invention work is to help you come up with as many ideas as you possibly can to use as examples to support your ideas. So in class we've talked about before how to do brainstorming, how to do mapping, which is also called spiderwebbing, and then also free writing. So what you want to do is think about your chosen position, and in this case, whether you think this dress code is a benefit or whether it's a hindrance. And what you want to do is come up with all the examples that you can that support that idea. So it might be a good idea to do like brainstorming. That might be the quickest thing to do. So you just quickly brainstorm a list of all the ways that you think it's a benefit. And you could even go ahead and do the other side too, and brainstorm a list of all the ways you think that it's a hindrance. But the point is to spend 5, maybe 10 minutes coming up with as many examples that you can possibly think of. And then what you want to do from this invention work is choose the 3 examples that you think are your strongest pieces. And then from these 3 examples, essentially what you're going to have are 3 supporting paragraphs. So you're going to take these 3 examples and you're going to write topic sentences, also known as subclaims, and argument for each example. For instance, for the prompt that we looked at a moment ago, you could say as an example, I think the Johnson & Wales student dress code is a benefit because, and then list all of your reasons because. Or I think the Johnson & Wales University student dress code is a hindrance because, and then list all your reasons that you think that this is a hindrance. And of course, all these examples are taken from your invention work. And all these are going to become the supporting paragraphs of your essay. So after you've got these supporting subclaims or topic sentences, what you want to do is make an outline for your paper. So essentially what you're asked to do in an in-class essay like this is simply just to write a 5-paragraph essay. So in your first paragraph, the intro is all about previewing the content of the body. So you're going to have a lead-in sentence that sort of leads us into the conversation. Give us a little background, and also state your thesis or your claim. And in this case, in this example that I'm giving you here, I've chosen, I think the Johnson & Wales student dress code is a benefit. And I can preview all of my reasons because in my intro. Because remember, the intro is supposed to preview the entire content of the body of a paper. Now in the body of the paragraph, I'm going to have my 3 supporting, in the body of the paper, I'm going to have my 3 supporting points. Each one of these represents a paragraph. So my subclaim or my topic sentence might be, and this is one of my reasons, because the dress code, it's a benefit because The dress code prepares students for the expectations of the professional world. Another example would be the dress code requirement allows students to build a professional wardrobe while still in college. And then my final example is the dress code allows students to always be prepared for an important job interview even while on campus. So what I would do in the body of my paper is start out with, this sentence would be the first sentence of my paragraph, because what a subclaim or a topic sentence does is it previews what that entire paragraph is going to be about. And then after that first sentence of that paragraph, I would provide examples of how it's true that the dress code prepares students for expectations of the professional world. So I'm going to have to think about all my experiences that I've had, all the things that I've read about, things that I've seen on TV. I can also use examples from people's lives that I know of, and I want to come up with an example that I can discuss in detail that's going to show how the dress code prepares students for expectations of the professional world. I would then repeat this process for the other two paragraphs. So I'll begin each paragraph with each of these sentences, but then in the body, in the remainder of that paragraph, I'm going to provide an example, for instance, in this one, that explains and shows and illustrates how the dress code allows students to build a professional wardrobe while still in college. And then I'll do the same thing with this one. I'll provide an example that shows how the dress code allows students to be prepared for a job interview even while on campus. So all my details of my argument are going to come in the body of the paper. So in the conclusion then, the function of the conclusion is to summarize all the things that I've discussed in the body and then to restate my thesis. But to restate that thesis in a different way. So it basically means the same thing, but it's simply just restated in different words. So you'll see that this is a much, much more effective way to prepare to write an in-class essay, because instead of walking in the classroom and quickly choosing something, I've simply thought through everything I'm going to say. Before I've written my first word, I understand what my thesis is. I understand what examples I'm going to use, and I understand clearly what order I'm going to present these in. So this is going to allow me as a student to write a much more effective essay in the time that I'm allowed to write this in class. So once you've got your outline, then it's time to begin writing, not before. So using that outline, I'm going to draft my essay, and you'll have 2 hours to complete this final exam or this general writing requirement exam. So you should work quickly, but pace yourself, and understand that 2 hours is a lot of time to write a 5-paragraph essay. And when you finish your essay, don't just quickly hand it in and leave. If you have another hour left, spend that hour going back and rereading your draft and looking for grammar and punctuation errors, particularly careless errors like typos and things like that as well. And do not hand that essay in until you've carefully read through your essay and revised it. So if you walk into class on the day of the final exam now, you understand some things that will help you improve your chances of receiving a good grade. Just remember, if you finish early, don't waste that extra time. Spend it revising and editing your essay to ensure a good grade on the assignment.